Welcome to the debate. Imagine waking up one morning and you discover that a tool you've been using your entire life, say like a highly advanced supercomputer, has quietly fused with your biology,
Oh, wow. That's a heavy image right out of the gate.
right? It's intense because it now dictates where you walk, what you say, and, exactly how you feel. But the truly terrifying part isn't just the assimilation itself. It's the fact that you don't even realize you're no longer the one operating the machine. You actually believe you are the machine.
It's chilling, really. Complete invisible assimilation. I mean, you have a master, but you're utterly convinced that you are the master.
Exactly. You think you're the master, but you're the servant. And according to Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, that invisible supercomputer is, well, it's your own mind. That image cuts right to the heart of our discourse today, which is rooted entirely in this text.
Right.
We are examining a pretty radical proposition here. Is human suffering fundamentally a product of our unconscious identification with the mind and with time? And further, is radical presence being totally in the now, the absolute sole path to true liberation?
It's a massive question.
It is. I'll be arguing that identification with the compulsive mind and psychological time is quite literally a disease. True identity and peace are only found by stepping completely outside the stream of thought into the eternal present.
While I find the text's dissection of human anxiety to be extraordinarily profound, I really do. I maintain that its strict bifurcation between the mind and consciousness presents a distinct intellectual paradox.
Okay, how so?
Well, specifically, the text demands a clean separation between practical clock time and obsessive psychological time. I'll argue that the very mind the text seeks to transcend is intrinsically essential for recognizing, navigating, and actually learning from reality.
All right, let's lay out the foundation of this. The text posits that humanity is suffering from a collective disease, and it stems from a single catastrophic error in human evolution. Namely, we believe we are our minds. Talley points to the philosopher René Descartes, who believed he had found the most fundamental truth when he made his famous statement, "I think, therefore I am."
Right, the ultimate undeniable truth of Western philosophy. If I'm thinking, I must exist.
Exactly. But the text argues that in reality, Descartes gave expression to the most basic error of human existence. He equated thinking with being and identity with thought.
Which is a profound shift in perspective.
It really is. It's an error because it reduces the vastness of who we are to a tiny, constant stream of computation. The text illustrates this beautifully with the parable of the beggar.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, it's so good. So, a man has been sitting by the side of a road for 30 years. A stranger walks by, and the beggar asks for spare change. The stranger says he has nothing to give, but asks the beggar what he's sitting on. "Just an old box," the beggar says.
Right, he hasn't even looked.
Exactly. The stranger insists he look inside. The beggar pries open the lid, and to his astonishment, the box is filled with gold.
It's a great parable, and it resonates perfectly today.
Because we are that beggar. We constantly look outside ourselves for scraps of validation, security, pleasure. And we completely ignore the radiant joy of being that is already within us. The mind is merely a survival machine. Because it's bound by time, it constantly covers up the present moment, which is the only place where true life actually exists, causing endless, unnecessary suffering.
It is undeniably powerful. And, we all recognize that frantic external searching in our own behavior. We doom scroll for a hit of dopamine. Or we chase a promotion thinking, once I get that new title, I'll finally feel secure.
Exactly. We've all been there.
But we have to look closely at how the text simultaneously vilifies the mind and yet utterly relies upon it. The text itself acknowledges that the mind is a superb instrument when used rightly. It's the instrument responsible for building civilizations, for analyzing complex systems, for splitting the atom.
A superb instrument, yes, but one that has grown into a monster because it's taken over the driver's seat.
But the framework the text sets up is incredibly difficult to reconcile in practice. It distinguishes between clock time, which it defines as practical planning, setting goals, learning from the past, and psychological time, which is the obsessive projection into the future and identification with past trauma.
Right. That's the core distinction.
My contention is that learning from past mistakes inherently requires psychological integration. You can't decouple the two cleanly. Demanding we strictly separate practical time from psychological time is, frankly, an intellectual paradox.
Well, let's look closer at the mechanics of this so-called superb instrument. The text points out that 80 to 90% of most people's thinking isn't just repetitive and useless. Because of its dysfunctional negative nature, it's actually physically harmful.
Physically harmful?
Yes, it causes a serious leakage of vital energy. Think about replaying a shower argument in your head over and over, or imagining a catastrophe at work that never actually happens. This incessant mental noise prevents us from finding any realm of inner stillness.
Look, I don't disagree that we suffer from mental noise. That background static is exhausting for everyone. But if we are writing off 90% of thought as a harmful energy leak, aren't we dismissing the very mechanism that processes our reality?
We aren't dismissing processing. We're distinguishing between mechanical survival calculation and true intelligence. The mind loves to get its teeth into problems. It loves to build atom bombs and solve crossword puzzles.
Sure.
But the text makes a crucial point about how true creativity functions. It points to a nationwide inquiry among America's most eminent mathematicians, including Albert Einstein, which revealed that thinking actually plays only a subordinate part in the brief, decisive phase of the creative act itself.
Wait, only a subordinate part?
Yes. Great scientists report that their breakthroughs don't come from grinding through equations. They come in a state of mental quietude, a state of no mind. The mind is just a survival machine. It gathers, stores, and analyzes data. True intelligence comes from being, and the mind merely gives form to that creative impulse.
I come at it from a different way. Let's accept the premise that the mind is a survival machine. And as the text says, it loves to chew on problems just as a dog loves to chew on bones.
Right.
If the mind is an autonomous entity that operates compulsively and we are completely identified with it, we're unconscious slaves to this possessing entity. How can we possibly rely on it to suddenly recognize its own dysfunction? How do we consciously choose to find the off button if the mind is the only tool we have?
That is the million-dollar question.
It seems to me that the intellect, the capacity to observe and categorize, is not an enemy. It's a necessary point along human evolution that allows us to even grasp the concept of consciousness in the first place.
I have to admit, I was genuinely stuck here when I first engaged with this. I thought, wait, isn't deciding to stop thinking just another thought? It feels like a total paradox. I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective.
Go ahead.
You're assuming the watcher, the part of you that recognizes the dysfunction, is the mind. The text is very explicit that it is not. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. The I am, realization, the sense of your own presence, is not a thought. It arises from beyond the mind.
Okay, so it's a completely separate faculty?
Exactly. To use an original analogy inspired by the text, the mind is like a magnifying glass. Used briefly, it can focus the light of consciousness to start a fire, which is a practical necessity.
Right.
But if you leave it permanently fixed in one place, the focused heat will burn down the entire forest. The problem isn't the magnifying glass. The problem is that we never put it down.
That's a vivid analogy. But let's examine what actually happens when we try to put that magnifying glass down. Because if we follow the causal logic of the text, the mind's ultimate trap, the way it keeps us holding the magnifying glass, is through the creation of time.
Yes, exactly. Time and mind are completely inseparable. The mind seeks to cover up the present moment with the past and the future, to ensure it remains in control.
To validate itself.
Right, the past gives you an identity, and the future holds the promise of salvation or fulfillment. And the text argues both are complete illusions.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the logical limits of calling time a complete illusion?
Well, the text states it quite clearly by asking us to look at our direct experience. Have you ever experienced, done, thought, or felt anything outside the now? It's impossible.
Well, technically speaking,
Nothing ever happened in the past. It happened in the now. Nothing will ever happen in the future. It will happen in the now. The past is simply a memory trace stored in the mind, which you reactivate now. The future is an imagined now, a projection of the mind. Past and future have no reality of their own.
So they're just reflections.
They are pale reflections of the light and power of the eternal present, just as the moon merely reflects the light of the sun. Because we focus on these illusions, we accumulate psychological time, which is the mental disease causing our anxiety.
I understand the philosophical elegance of the moon and the sun metaphor, but let's look at the text's own definition of clock time. Clock time includes setting goals, predicting the future by means of patterns learned from the past, and taking action based on those predictions.
Yes, that's correct.
Wait, I'm genuinely stuck here. Let's take a basic human survival scenario. If I touch a hot stove, I learn not to touch it again. That requires memory. It requires integrating a past failure to prevent a future injury.
Sure.
How on earth does the text expect me to separate that practical learning from the psychological emotion of the burn? The division between clock time and psychological time seems entirely theoretical.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it conflates practical memory with egoic identity. Let me ground this in a modern example. Let's say you have a mortgage.
Okay.
Clock time is sitting down at 2 p.m., opening your laptop, and scheduling the payment. It's practical. You use memory to know how much is due, and you project into the future to ensure the money is there. That's clock time.
Okay, that makes sense. It's functional.
But clock time becomes psychological time when it becomes linked to a false sense of identity. Psychological time is lying awake at 3 a.m., terrified of losing the house, beating yourself up for a financial mistake you made 5 years ago, and tying your entire self-worth as a human being to your financial status.
Right, the spiraling.
You've made the mistake into me and mine. The text draws a very sharp, practical line here. You extract the data from the past, but the moment you dwell on it mentally, when self-criticism or guilt come up, you are trapped in psychological time.
I see the distinction.
The same applies to the future. Setting a goal is clock time, but if you become obsessively focused on the goal because you're seeking a more complete sense of self in it, the now is reduced to a mere stepping stone. The journey is no longer an adventure. It's infected by the obsessive need to make it.
So the distinction relies entirely on emotional detachment. You can analyze the data of a past failure, but you must not feel remorse. You can plan for the future, but you must not feel anticipation or desire for the outcome.
You must not seek your identity in the outcome. When your deeper sense of self is derived from being, from simply existing in the now, your happiness doesn't depend on the external outcome. There is no fear of failure, which to the ego just means a loss of self.
But if we fail to maintain this pristine detachment, if we fail to separate ourselves from psychological time, where does all that unexpressed anxiety go? Because it doesn't just vanish. According to the text, it physically lodges in the body. And this brings us directly to the physical consequence of living in time, the concept of the pain body.
Yes, perfectly stated. The text defines emotion as the body's reaction to the mind. Because the egoic mind is inherently insecure and constantly perceives threats to its existence, the message it continuously sends to the body is danger.
A constant state of fight or flight.
Exactly. The body's physical reaction to this continuous threat is fear. Over time, every emotional pain that you experience leaves behind a residue. This accumulated pain merges with pain from the past and becomes lodged in your mind and body. The text calls this the emotional pain body.
And it describes it almost like a parasite, right?
Yes, it's a semi-autonomous entity consisting of trapped life energy. When it awakens from its dormant state, it literally feeds on negative drama, anger, and unconsciousness. It wants you to identify with it so it can take you over and create situations in your life that reflect its own frequency of pain. Think of someone picking a massive fight with their partner over something trivial, simply because their pain body is hungry for drama.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Okay,
Throughout the text, there is a massive emphasis on not labeling or judging the present moment. We are repeatedly told that labeling creates the opaque screen of thought that cuts us off from reality.
True.
Yet, when the text describes the pain body, the language used is intensely judgmental. It labels the pain body as an alien, nasty creature, a destructive monster, a vicious demon, and an obnoxious child.
Well,
If the ultimate goal is to step back into neutral, non-judgmental observation of what is, isn't conceptualizing our emotional pain as a literal monster feeding on us just another dramatic mental label? Isn't this the exact mind activity the text warns us against?
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. Those descriptors, monster, demon, alien creature, aren't judgments. They're highly functional warnings.
Warnings.
Yes. The text is trying to jolt the reader out of their complacency. When people are completely identified with their anger or depression, they believe those destructive impulses are who they genuinely are. By characterizing the pain body as an entity, the text helps the reader disidentify from it. It allows you to step back and say, that is not me, that is the pain body. Furthermore, the solution offered by the text is absolutely not to fight the monster,
It explicitly states you can't fight it, right?
because fighting it implies resistance, which is just more mind.
Precisely.
Fighting it creates inner conflict, which just feeds the pain body more energy. The solution is the esoteric art of alchemy, and let's explain how that actually works, because it's vital. You bring the light of conscious presence to the pain.
Like focusing your attention inward.
Let's say somebody cuts you off in traffic. The mind immediately starts a story about how disrespectful they are. Instead of following the story, you observe the feeling directly. You feel the tightness in your chest, the heat in your stomach. You feel its energy field within you, but you don't think about it.
You just feel it?
You don't label it anger. By sustaining conscious attention on the physical sensation, you sever the link between the pain body and your thought processes. You starve it of the mental loop. The pain body then becomes fuel for the flame of your consciousness. The suffering is transmuted into peace without any conflict whatsoever. Unconsciousness creates the pain body. Consciousness transmutes it into light.
I concede that the practice of observing one's emotional state without immediately acting upon it is an incredibly potent psychological tool. By watching the emotion, rather than becoming it, you interrupt the feedback loop between thought and physical reaction.
It breaks the cycle.
It does, but the text frames this as a leap into a completely different dimension of existence, a shift from the time-bound mind into pure consciousness. It suggests we can eventually exist in a state totally free of all negativity. And I maintain that while presence is a profound state to visit, the mind's capacity to navigate clock time, to analyze reality, and to weigh the past against the future remains an inseparable and vital component of human existence.
But
To view the mind as an entity that must be continually subdued or escaped risks alienating us from our own cognitive tools.
the mind isn't subdued. It's simply returned to its proper place as a servant rather than the master. Our discussion clearly shows the stark contrast in these perspectives. The text insists that as long as the mind is the master, we will suffer. We are trapped in the compulsion to live almost exclusively through memory and anticipation.
Right.
Observing the thinker, stepping out of thought, and moving into the timeless now isn't just a psychological tool. It's the only true end to the pain body and to human suffering. When we discover the life underneath our life situation, we access an intelligence far greater than the analytical mind.
And yet, we both converge on a very practical reality outlined in the text. There's no denying the assessment that chronic compulsive thinking, this widespread inability to sit peacefully in the present moment, is a primary source of global anxiety.
Absolutely.
We live in an industrial civilization driven by a deep-seated sense of lack and unease, constantly projecting into the future for a salvation that never seems to arrive. Whether you view it as a disease to be cured by spiritual alchemy or a psychological imbalance that requires better mental regulation, the inability to stop the noise in our heads is causing undeniable harm.
It is the background static of perpetual discontent. We're all waiting to start living, reducing the present moment to a mere means to an end.
Which brings us back to the complexity of existing in a world governed by form and time while trying to achieve a state of no mind. It's a delicate, continuous balance, utilizing the mind as a necessary tool to build and survive, while simultaneously knowing how to put that tool down and simply rest in the joy of being.
It's the difference between wielding the tool and letting the tool wield you. There is so much more to explore within this material, so many layers to how we navigate our inner space. But for now, we leave you with the image we began with. Look closely at the device in your hand, the thoughts in your head, and the timeline of your life, and ask yourself, are you the one holding the machine, or has the machine taken hold of you?